Good evening, everybody. It's your old pal Martin Metalhead here. I hope you're going well. A couple of years ago around Easter, I wrote a blog post about how I wanted to visit Yemen in 2013. And since I don't have my blog anymore, I think it's about time I make it a vlog. Now, the year was 2013, 8 years ago. And I'd just been on 24 nations. In the previous year, I'd been to Iran, the UAE, India, Nepal, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Germany, United Kingdom, Turkey, yeah. And so I really wanted to make big plans to go to a lot of nations. But then there's this one country I really thought a bit hard about wanting to go to. I wanted to go to Sana'a Yemen. And my main aim was basically to fly from Germany to Turkey, then from Turkey to the UAE, and then fly from the UAE to Sana'a in Yemen, spend 3 days going to this big, this former palace which is on a rock, which I'll look it up right now. Palace. Yeah, it's basically what it formerly was in the North Yemen in my dad's day. So this palace is called Dar al-Hajj, and so the Sultan of North Yemen would live there back in the day before he was kicked out in the Yemeni Revolution in the 1960s. And there was 2 revolutions in Yemen. So I was 27 at the time. I thought, yeah, I'm going to go to Yemen. So the funny thing was, in Sydney, Australia, they have a honorary consulate of Yemen, which works underneath the building of the Moroccan consulate in North Sydney. So one day I walked into the consulate and this guy was on the phone. I said, look, I would like to apply for a visa for Yemen. So I handed over my British passport. And then a week later he says, oh, look, can you come in with $100 and a return flight? And so I filled out the form, got $100 out of my bank, and just booked a return flight from Dubai to Sana'a. And I was given this visa right here, that would give me 30 days in Yemen, I guess, and it'd be valid for a period of 6 months. And it was even stamped and beautiful and signed and all, Republic of Yemen. But after I got that visa, a lot of downward things happened to my life. Like this cafe I was working for, Harvest Cafe and Bar, they decided to close down because one manager, Mrs. S, decided that she didn't want to renew the lease, and the other manager, Mrs. A, basically she wanted to start a new business after Shelley had backstabbed her. So at the start of April, I was out of a job, and I had this one other job in a stupid menu business in my town of Borkham Hills, and this woman in charge would only give me 6 hours of work a week. And so when I told her that I was going to go move to England, she just basically let me go a few weeks prior to leaving. And now, when I was about to fly out to England, I got really sad because basically, I'd lost my job, I had lost interest in trying to find a new job before I went away, and then basically, I just lacked confidence. I just told myself, I'm not ready to move to the United Kingdom. I'm not really ready to do this. So I flew to England after a weekend in Singapore, and I spent some time with my grandma in Middlesbrough, and then I took the bus to Hellfest, where this guy urinated on my tent. And if you've known about me for the last couple of years, I retired from heavy metal festivals, 3-day camping festivals in 2013, because I thought, you know what, I'm wasting my life going to these stupid festivals. Why can't I just do something better in life? So after a few days in England, I decided to travel to what did I travel to? I wanted to travel. So I went back to England, and I didn't feel ready to be. I wasn't ready to live in the United Kingdom. I thought, I still want to travel a little bit. So I travelled all the way from London to Istanbul within a week. And it was in my time in Bulgaria and Sofia that I started getting really bad back problems. And I was carrying around 7 kilograms a day in a bag every day, just going to all these different countries, like not even a day of rest, of sightseeing, just carrying that bag. And by the time I got to Istanbul, I basically booked a flight to Dubai. And my plan was to land in Dubai and try to find a flight to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. But as soon as I got to the Gulf Air counter, they basically said, oh, there's no flights to Addis Ababa for the next few days. And this was in a time before I ever had a smartphone, and I didn't even travel with a laptop. So I basically was on a wing and a prayer. So I had 2 visas on my passport, Nepal and Yemeni. And after like a whole day in Dubai, I basically bit the bullet and I decided to fly to Nepal via India. And I gave up on my trip to Yemen. Mainly, the funny thing was, I was supposed to go there in July 2013, but I left for England, so it was a month earlier than I planned. And then, after a few days in Nepal, not really liking, not feeling happy, I ended up in Australia. And that started my 17th month, like, downward spiral of not traveling, not going anywhere, being addicted to escorts. And so, I gave up on my chance of going to Yemen. And I kind of always felt that I've had a thorn in my passport for that visa. I've always wanted to figure out what I'm going to say to a border officer if he looks at it. I'm like, I never went to Yemen, never set foot in the Yemen Arab Republic, never been there. And also, I am a tourist, not a terrorist, because that's what this guy in Iraq, Bandakan, is like taught us all. I'm a tourist, not a terrorist. So, people who go to these countries should not really be speculated about them being evil and all. Because in my opinion, look, if you carry a passport and your passport says you're free to travel to any country in the world, do so. You don't belong to a country where basically you can't go to other nations because of bad relations. So we're going to go look at the map of Yemen right now. So this is a map of Yemen, or how they call it, like the Yemen Arab Republic. So the Republic of Yemen basically is all this land here, and including the island of Socotra. Now, before the whole war happened, you could pretty much go to places like the capital Sana'a or Aden, and you could go to like this part here, but most of this area in the middle is quite dangerous. And a lot of people who really want to go to Yemen went to this little island right here on the Indian Ocean or Arabic Sea, they call it, or Arabian Gulf, Gulf of Aden, the island of Socotra. If you can see right there. Now, in the current situation in the Yemen civil war, basically the UN recognized government is basically in control of like all these areas, including the border crossings with Oman and a few border crossings with Saudi Arabia. The Houthis control this part, which in my finalist day was basically North Yemen, and then the rest of Yemen was like Southern Yemen. And so the funny thing is, Aden is actually controlled by the Southern Council, and Aden was actually a former British colony. So the Southern Council controls a little bit of areas, and then there's always been a little bit of extremist groups around this area. And what can you say? Look at Socotra. It's also under the Southern Control Council, also backed by the UAE. Now, before the whole pandemic, like let's say we're talking about 2019, if you wanted to go to Yemen, just for the sake of going there, basically you'd fly into this town in Oman called Salalah. And you'd hire a driver, and you'd drive from Salalah, go through all the checkpoints into the Oman border, stamp out of Oman, and once you get to the Yemen border, you'd have to pay $100 to get a visa stamped on your passport, and plus you'd have to meet up with a guide there. Now, according to the people who have done this, and I've done a lot of research about them, including like Thorth from Once Upon a Saga, and Drew Binsky, basically a lot of people just go to this town right here called Hawf, Hawf, and they just go there for the 24 hours, and they go back to the Oman border. The only problem is you need like a double entry visa to get back to Oman. Now, when we talk about Drew Binsky, right, Drew Binsky basically crossed this border and then basically traveled south, like deep into Yemen, like all around this area, though I don't think he entered any other I don't think any foreigner has been brave enough to enter Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. He's probably just travelled around here. That's a Sayoun, because, matter of fact, there are actually flights from Cairo that stop in Sayoun that go on to the Scotora Island. And a lot of other tourists that I have studied about, like Beck and the Hungry Nomads, that they didn't want to go to mainland Yemen, so they went to Socotra, which is basically still part of Yemen, but it's like much safer and much beautiful, got a lot of amazing trees, fauna, flora. Oh, I'm back here. Well, anyway, even though it's been 8 years since I pulled out of going to Yemen, I still have high hopes that I'm going to get there someday. The situation only allows me to either enter Hawf in the east of the country or the island of Socotra. The cheapest way to get to Yemen you'd have to go to the border, as I said, to Hawf, and just have a day trip. Because if you go to Socotra, you'd be paying like $1,000 for flying from Cairo to Socotra and back. I don't really think the war is going to end anytime soon, because apart from that, there's a huge problem going on in the country, like a cholera outbreak. And many years ago, I had the cholera vaccine. I had like 2 vials put in my mouth, and I do it every 2 years. So I'm cured of cholera. Like, I don't have to deal with cholera when I travel. So there's like 24 million people in this one country of Yemen, and that's like the same population as my own country of Australia. And they're really in need of aid right now. So people in the Western world, we need to start like throwing money at, like, you know, Red Cross and all these other charities, like help the people of Yemen, because otherwise Yemen's famine is going to be like, well, my father's my father's generation is in that the whole famine that happened in Biafra during the war. So my generation of Biafra is actually the Yemen. Like, I don't like to compare the two, but they're both similar in like different parts of the world. So anyway, I always pray every day that the people of Yemen will find peace and that the extremists will be outwiped, and that, you know, despite the whole divide of Shia-Sunni, or like East and West, or anti-imperialism and imperialism, I believe, you know, that peace has to happen in Yemen. I mean, if you want to have a good idea about what the country used to be like, you really should check on the movie Salmon Fishing in the Yemen. I know it's fictional, but that's what Yemen could be like in years to come if things settle down. Anyway, Metalhead over and out.